The clock on the bridge read 02:47 a.m. The sea looked calm, too calm. For the crew of the 58,000-ton crude carrier Meridian Crown, the night had been uneventful. The vessel was moving steadily through one of the world's most dangerous maritime choke points, carrying millions of barrels of oil toward international markets. Nothing appeared unusual. No storms, no pirate activity, no emergency warnings. Then everything changed. A radar operator suddenly froze. The contact had appeared. Then another. Then three more. The officer leaned closer to his display. The objects were moving impossibly fast. Before anyone could issue a warning, a violent flash erupted across the darkness. A Shockwaves-style attack, drones slammed directly into the tanker's forward hull. The explosion tore through layers of steel, metal folded backward like paper. A fireball rose hundreds of feet into the air. The bridge shook. Alarms screamed throughout the vessel. Crew members were thrown from their stations. For several terrifying seconds, nobody understood what had happened. Then the captain saw it. A massive wound had been ripped into the ship's side. Flames were already spreading across the deck. The Meridian Crown was losing speed. Fast. The tanker was not sinking. Not yet, but it was becoming something almost as dangerous. A stationary target. The captain ordered evasive maneuvers. The command came too late. 3 additional attack drones were already racing across the water. Their engines produced a distinctive buzzing sound, a sound sailors throughout the region had learned to fear. The drones were less than 7 miles away, closing rapidly. The tanker had no defensive weapons, no missiles, no electronic warfare systems, nothing. It was a commercial vessel trapped inside a battlefield, and the attackers knew it. 20 miles west, however, another set of eyes was watching. The USS Mason, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, had detected the same contact seconds earlier. Inside the Combat Information Center, dozens of screens glowed in the darkness. Radar tracks multiplied. Threat indicators flashed. Operators exchanged rapid reports. The tactical picture was getting worse by the second. But what happened next confused everyone watching from the enemy coastline. Instead of moving toward the tanker, the destroyer turned away. Its engines surged. The warship accelerated. Distance between the destroyer and the tanker began increasing. Enemy observers watching through thermal cameras smiled. Exactly as planned, the American ship appeared to be retreating. The tanker appeared abandoned. The attackers believed they had forced the U.S. Navy to choose self-preservation over intervention. What they did not realize was that they were only seeing the first move of a much larger operation. The 3 drones continued their approach. 6 miles, 5 miles, 4. The burning tanker struggled to maneuver. It felt like trying to dodge bullets while steering a skyscraper. Then new contacts appeared, not in the sky, in the water. 8 small signatures emerged from hidden coves along the coastline. Low profile. Fast. Deadly. Unmanned explosive boats. Each one carried hundreds of pounds of military explosives. Each one could destroy a ship with a single hit. Together they formed a coordinated strike package. A mechanical wolf pack. The drones in the air would force the crew to focus upward. The explosive boats would attack below the waterline. A perfect combination, at least on paper. The swarm accelerated. White spray erupted behind them. The distance closed rapidly. The enemy commanders believed victory was now inevitable. Then something strange happened. One of the attack boats abruptly turned. Hard. Almost 90 degrees. It began circling aimlessly. Another slowed down. The third accelerated unexpectedly before shutting down completely. Operators attempted to regain control. Nothing worked. One after another, the attack boats started behaving irrationally. Some spun in circles. Others drifted. Several stopped entirely. The coordinated swarm had collapsed. The attackers stared at their screens in disbelief. What happened? The answer was invisible. Miles away, the USS Mason had deployed one of its most powerful weapons. Not a missile. Not a gun. Information. Powerful electronic warfare arrays aboard the destroyer were flooding the battlespace with false signals. Satellite guidance systems were being manipulated. Navigation data was being corrupted. The attack boats no longer knew where they were. Their computers believed they were operating hundreds of miles inland. The sea drones had not been destroyed. They had been tricked. The entire wolf pack was now lost inside its own digital nightmare. For a moment, the attackers hesitated. Then they made a decision. If electronic warfare was being used this aggressively, perhaps the destroyer had exhausted its missile inventory. Perhaps it was bluffing. Perhaps this was the moment to commit their most powerful weapon. Minutes later, satellite sensors detected a massive thermal bloom. The coastline erupted. A ballistic missile launcher had fired. The weapon climbed into the darkness. Higher, 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 until it reached the edge of space. The missile was enormous. Several tons of metal and rocket fuel, built for one purpose, destroying large ships. As it reached the apex of its flight path, the missile rolled over and began its descent. Its speed increased rapidly. Mach 2, Mach 3, Mach 4. The atmosphere around the weapon began glowing. To anyone below, it looked like a falling star. But this star carried enough energy to split a ship in half. The Meridian Crown remained directly in its path. Inside the enemy command center, officers watched confidently. This was the kill shot. No commercial vessel could survive such an impact. No escort force was close enough to intervene, or so they believed. The missile descended through 90,000 feet, 80,000, 70,000. Then intelligence analysts monitoring the battle discovered something unexpected. A fishing vessel. It had been sitting quietly less than 2 miles from the tanker throughout the entire attack. Nobody had paid much attention to it. Why would they? It looked harmless, old, weathered, civilian. Then panels on its decks suddenly opened. Large antennas emerged. Military-grade radar arrays unfolded. Satellite communication systems activated. The fishing vessel was not a fishing vessel. It was a hidden targeting platform, a forward observer, a disguised battlefield sensor feeding real-time coordinates to the incoming missile. The attackers had hidden their eyes in plain sight, and now those eyes were guiding a hypersonic spear directly toward the tanker. The countdown had begun. 30 seconds. 29. 28. The missile continued falling. The tanker burned below. The disguised vessel transmitted continuously. Enemy commanders prepared for confirmation of destruction. But 60 miles away, aboard the USS Mason, another piece of the puzzle was moving into position, high above the clouds, far beyond visual range. A silent aircraft had been circling for hours, watching, listening, waiting. And now, for the first time that night, it was about to reveal itself. The enemy thought they controlled the battlefield. They thought the tanker was trapped. They thought the destroyer was retreating. In reality, the most dangerous player in the entire operation had not yet made a move, and in less than 30 seconds, the sky itself was about to become a weapon. The ballistic missile continued its descent. 70,000 feet, 60,000, 50,000. Its nose cone glowed white-hot as friction ripped across its surface. To the crew aboard the Meridian Crown, it looked like a second sun had appeared above the ocean. Nobody on the tanker knew exactly what was happening. They only knew something enormous was falling directly toward them. The captain stared through the bridge windows. The burning sections of the ship illuminated the night. Below deck, emergency crews were still fighting fires. Several compartments had already been sealed. Damage control teams worked desperately to prevent flooding from spreading deeper into the vessel. But none of that would matter if the missile hit. One impact, 1 second, and the Meridian Crown would simply cease to exist. 25 seconds remained. Meanwhile, 60 miles away, the USS Mason had stopped pretending. Inside the destroyer's Combat Information Center, the atmosphere was calm, focused, professional. No panic, no shouting, only rapid calculations. The battle management system had already built a firing solution. Data was flowing into the ship from multiple sources simultaneously. Radar, infrared tracking, electronic surveillance, satellite feeds, and most importantly, the aircraft orbiting high above the battlefield. The enemy never detected it. They never even looked for it, because the aircraft was not transmitting. It was not broadcasting radar signals. It was not announcing its presence. It was simply watching. A silent hunter in the darkness. Its thermal sensors had tracked the ballistic missile from the instant its rocket motor ignited on the coastline. Every movement, every correction, every change in trajectory. The missile thought it was invisible. It was not. Inside the destroyer, the tactical commander gave a single order: engage. 4 missile cell covers exploded open. A fraction of a second later, 2 SM-6 interceptors erupted from the deck. Columns of fire illuminated the warship. The missiles climbed vertically before pitching sharply toward the threat. The enemy command center immediately noticed the launch. At first, they were not worried. Their missile was falling from near space, traveling at extreme speed. No warship should have been capable of stopping it. At least that was the theory. But modern warfare rarely follows theory. The SM-6 accelerated violently, their rocket motors pushing them toward the upper atmosphere. Unlike traditional interceptor missiles, these weapons did not rely solely on the launching ship. They were part of a network, a moving web of sensors and shooters spread across hundreds of miles. The aircraft tracked, the destroyer fired, the missile listened. Information flowed continuously. Every second brought updated targeting data. Every second tightened the intercept geometry. The gap closed rapidly. 15 seconds. The ballistic missile descended through 40,000 feet. 10 seconds. The interceptors climbed. 5 seconds. Both weapons raced toward each other. The combined closing speed exceeded several thousand miles per hour. Then the night exploded. A brilliant flash erupted high above the ocean. For an instant, darkness vanished. The sky became white. A shockwave rippled outward. Fragments of metal scattered across the upper atmosphere. The ballistic missile had been destroyed. Completely. No warhead survived. No debris remained capable of reaching the tanker. The threat from above had disappeared. The crew aboard the Meridian Crown did not immediately understand what happened. They only saw the flash. Then the sudden realization that they were still alive. Cheers erupted across the bridge. Some sailors collapsed into chairs. Others simply stared upward. The impossible had happened. The missile never arrived, but the battle was not over. Not even close. The disguised fishing vessel was still transmitting. Its radar systems were still active. Its operators had just watched their carefully planned strike vanish in a ball of fire. Panic spread through the enemy crew. They immediately attempted to withdraw. Engines roared to life. The vessel turned away from the tanker. It was too late. The moment their radar activated, they revealed themselves. And once the U.S. Navy identified a target, that target rarely escaped. The USS Mason accelerated. Its bow sliced through the waves. Distance closed rapidly. Inside the destroyer, a new firing solution appeared. The target was small, fast, trying to evade. But technology had already solved that problem. The Mark 45 naval gun rotated toward the horizon. 5 inches of steel and precision engineering. A weapon refined through decades of combat. The gun fired. The recoil shook the ship. The guided projectile screamed across the darkness. Unlike traditional shells, this round could adjust its course during flight. Tiny control surfaces corrected its path. Tracking. Calculating. Hunting. The disguised vessel zigzagged desperately. It did not matter. The shell followed. Seconds later it struck. Direct hit. The projectile penetrated deep into the vessel before detonating. The explosion ripped through the engine compartment. Fuel ignited instantly. Flames engulfed the deck. Then something unexpected happened. A second explosion followed, much larger, far more violent. The enemy crew had prepared demolition charges throughout the vessel. They never intended for their technology to be captured. If defeat became inevitable, everything would be destroyed. The naval shell triggered those explosives. The result was catastrophic. The vessel vanished inside a massive fireball. Radar equipment, communication systems, antenna arrays, everything disappeared. Fragments rained into the ocean. The hidden observer was gone. The battlefield had suddenly become much quieter. But there was still unfinished business. The disabled explosive boats remained scattered across the water. Although jammed, they were still dangerous. Each one contained enough explosives to cripple a major vessel. Leaving them unattended was not an option. The USS Mason cleared its flight deck. Moments later, 2 MH-60R Seahawk helicopters lifted into the air. Their rotors thundered across the night. Each helicopter carried precision-guided missiles beneath its wings. The pilots moved methodically, one target at a time. Lock, fire, impact, explosion. The first explosive boat disappeared beneath a towering column of water. Then another. Then another. The operation became almost mechanical. Every missile found its mark. Every target vanished. Within minutes, the entire swarm had been eliminated. The ocean that had been crowded with threats was now empty. Burning debris floated across the waves. The wolf pack no longer existed. Yet high above the battlefield, the surveillance aircraft had discovered something even more important. It had found the source. The launch site. The nest. Thermal imagery revealed a hidden missile complex concealed inside coastal cliffs. The enemy believed geography protected them. They believed mountains could hide them. They believed they could launch attacks and disappear before retaliation arrived. They were wrong, because the battle was no longer about defense. It was about consequences. And on the deck of the USS Mason, additional missile cells were already beginning to open. Far out on the horizon, beyond the burning coastline, a new phase of the operation was about to begin. The attackers had fired the first shot. Now they were about to discover what happened when the United States Navy fired the last one.